Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. At this time, we'll call back into open session this meeting of the Arlington Independent School District Board of Trustees for May 3rd, beginning at 7 p.m. I want to thank you all for coming out to be with us tonight. We'll start our meeting with the opening ceremony. Would you please join our staff auditor, Mr. Tim Edwards, for the pledge.
Everyone join me, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Actually, Mr. Edwards is our internal auditor. He's one of our 2 employees. Now, if you would please join me in a moment of silence. Thank you. If you would please silence your cell phones. First item is programs and presentations, and we have none. No appointments, no public hearing. No action items. Oh, not yet. Okay, open forum for agenda items. Nice try. This is a routine part of the school board's agenda for regularly scheduled meetings. This segment of the meeting provides citizens with an opportunity to share their views with the trustees on items that are on the agenda tonight. It is not intended to be a discussion or a debate, and trustees will not reply to the speakers. Derogatory comments aimed at an individual will not be tolerated, and personnel matters are not appropriate subjects for the open forum. I have 1 card tonight from the audience. When your name is called, please step to the podium. You will have 5 minutes to speak. A lighted timer on the podium will assist you in pacing your presentation. A yellow light will illuminate when there is 1 minute left for you to complete your presentation, and when the red light comes on and the buzzer sounds, please end your presentation. Our 1 card tonight is from Laura Perez. Subject is CTM's Market Study.
That's me.
Okay, come on down. Oh, just like, I'm thinking, let's make it. Price is right?
Hi.
Okay.
How are you? Good evening.
Good evening.
We have some information that they will be passing out to you guys, but I wanted to say thank you for listening to our comments, and hopefully I can conduct this speech well and not be so nervous. So, hello, my name is Laura Perez, and I have been a computer technology manager for 5 years at Hill Elementary. I come here tonight with the understanding that AISD is considering conducting a market study on CTMs. I urge you to pursue this market study because CTMs at AISD are grossly underpaid. The current job description is almost 20 years old and is out of date. When written, not every classroom had a computer, and now each room has at least 7 pieces of equipment, not including the labs, which can hold up to 30 to 40 pieces in each room. A current total of about 650 pieces in the building, and double, even triple that amount for the high schools. In the marketplace today, salaries range from $15,000 to $25,000 more annually, supporting half of the pieces, and a team with maybe 2 or 3 that AISD CTMs support with the same skill set. Recently, some of the AISD CTMs met and compiled a summary of our current job responsibilities. Please review this list when conducting your market study. I know that you will find that the CTM's responsibilities no longer reflect the current salaries. Technology is a vital part of our schools, and today, with the current salaries, the district will not be able to keep quality people in this position. CTMs are vital to our school and our future accordance to technology, and the pay should reflect it. The current salary rate cannot sustain a family or individual with insurance. Even if you factor in summer break, the current pay rate is thousands of dollars below the average IT support position. Again, I thank you for listening, and I hope that you consider using our current proposed job description when you are working on your market study. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Perez. Brings us to the consent. Are there any items to be withdrawn from the consent agenda? Mr. McCullough.
Administration is asking that you consider a proposal for measuring and assessing progress of a long-range educational plan separately. Letter I.
Letter I. Any other items to be withdrawn? Ms. Powell.
President Barron, board members, Mr. McCullough, good evening. There are 10 bids on the agenda this evening for your consideration, and in all cases, administration is recommending the lowest bids and the bids that represent the best value to the district. It's also my privilege this evening to report that our schools have received donations from the following individuals and organizations: the Arlington High School Orchestra Booster Club, the Arlington High School Band Booster Club, Arlington High School Cheerleading Booster Club, the Arlington High School Baseball Booster Club, the Bowie High School Orchestra Booster Club, the Bowie High School Swimming Booster Club, Rotary Club of Arlington North, the Arlington Kiwanis Foundation, Lamar High School Boys Soccer Booster Club, Sarah Bearden, Lamar High School Softball Booster Club, Seguin High School Band Booster Club, the Word of Truth Family Church, Bowles Junior High School Orchestra Booster Club, Shackelford Junior High School Boys Athletic Booster Club, Margie Bryant, the Rotary Club of Arlington Sunrise, Key Elementary School PTA, and the Arlington ISD Education Foundation. The total donations that are presented for consideration this evening are $43,537, which brings our year-to-date total to $707,722.
Thank you, Ms. Powell, and thank you to our generous community. Is there a motion to accept the consent with the exception of item I?
Move that we accept.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Hibbs, second by Mrs. Pena. Any discussion on the consent? Mr. Hogg.
Thank you, Mr. Barron. Sorry, I should have pulled this before, but for the, I don't see what number it is, the N2 learning, I wanted to make sure we do have on the record is the legal has approved it, that? Okay.
Well, okay.
Is that the one we're pulling? Sorry, I didn't say, okay, thank you.
That's item I. Okay. All right. Okay. Please vote. All members present voting in the affirmative, the motion passes for the consent, and Mr. Pompa had another commitment tonight. He's not with us. Next, that brings us up to the item I. Mr. McCullough.
Thank you, President Barron. Administration asks that we pull this from the consent agenda because of a mistake we found in the N2 contract. You have received a copy tonight of the new contract, and you have been handed the most current version of this N2 contract. And the contract in your packet only had a 1-year term and a total cost of $33,000. The board communication packet page in your packet states that the contract is for a 3-year term, and this contract reflects that 3-year term. The maximum total cost over the 3-year period will be $79,000, and administration recommends approval of the contract that you, the hard copy you have tonight.
Move to approve.
Motion by Dr. Reich, second by Mr. Hogg to approve item I. Is there any further discussion? Please vote. All members present voting in the affirmative, the item I passes. Thank you. Takes us to discussion for the 2012-13 preliminary general fund budget. Mr. McCullough.
It's that time again, and but we're on a little earlier schedule this year because of our change in fiscal year. But we do have a preliminary budget, and I want to make sure that we all hear the word preliminary because it is a moving target right now. We received information 2 days ago from TEA that has an impact on us, and they had received information from the federal government on some different things that are happening in Washington, which will affect us eventually. And so we got that information on Tuesday, and sent you all some information about that. But that Mrs. Powell will be talking about that tonight, and just kind of an overview, and then we'll answer any questions you may have. You've had the packet for several days now, and but again, this is preliminary, and we're going to have several more meetings about the budget, and we pay our bills online, we shop online, and we have a preliminary budget. So, Mrs. Powell, let's get Mr. Hogg out of this.
Actually, I have to tell you from right here, I thought it was Mrs. Sullins.
We'll blame the Star Telegram for that. Pop-up ads, Miss Jenkins back.
All right. Mr. Barron, board members, Mr. McCullough, good evening. This is our first look at the 2012-2013 budget, and as Mr. McCullough described just now, this is a preliminary budget, and we know that the budget always changes from the first time we look at it as a preliminary budget and the point at which it's ultimately adopted by the board. I'm going to skip through some information and give you a very high-level overview here. If you look at our preliminary budget as it exists today, in the highlighted column, you will see that we are actually budgeting at the moment to have an $8.4 million surplus. And again, we have some other things that we know we need to take care of and address before we finalize this, but that's where we sit today. We are actually projecting that we will end the current year with a fund balance of $140 million. So that would be the starting point for next year's fund balance. And should we adopt the budget with the $8.4 million surplus that exists today, and again, we know that will change, that would bring the fund balance to $148 million at the end of next year. Again, I'll remind everybody that this we are changing our fiscal year. This will be the first time that we adopt a budget that runs from July 1 through June 30th. The year that we're in right now has been a transition year for us, and it was a short budget year. Some notes about next year's budget. Again, the budget cycle will change to July 1 through June 30th. The preliminary budget as it exists today assumes that the M&O tax rate will remain at $1.04. Should there be any increase in tax rate above that, it would require a approval through a tax ratification election. We also know that the state funding reductions that were approved last year will continue on into next year, the second year of the biennium. The staffing levels and the campus allotments that are included in the budget are based on projected enrollments. In terms of staffing at the high school level, we have added 31 teaching positions as the board approved in February to give high school teachers a daily conference period again. At that same meeting, the board also voted to have a cap on enrollment in core classes, a cap of 26, and our high schools have struggled with that to build their schedules within that cap, and so that is something that we're still working on. You may hear, we'll talk about that again in just a minute. This is a list of the new positions that are in the budget. The teachers that you see here were added through the staffing process and are the result of enrollment changes, and also the 31 teachers that we've added back at the high schools to give that daily conference period. The Counselor for Dropout Prevention is at the 600 New York facility, and that position is being funded out of state comp ed funds that are supposed to serve at-risk kids only. Administration then is recommending several additional positions be added into the budget, and in particular, we are recommending that 6 assistant principal positions that were eliminated this past year as part of the budget reductions be added back into the budget. So these are the professional positions, 63 of them, totaling $3.4 million that are new into the budget. This slide shows the paraprofessional positions and auxiliary positions that are new to the budget. There are a total of 5 at a cost of $120,000. We adopt the budget again as it sits today with that $8.4 million surplus that we just looked at. That would bring our fund balance up to representing total fund balance would be equal to 4 months of operating expenditures. The credit rating agencies look to see that you have 2 months of operating expenditures in your unassigned portion of your fund balance. So we're very healthy here. Again, we've said that this is a preliminary budget. We know that there are some additional things that we need to consider. FFC made recommendations to this board at the last meeting. Those recommendations total a little over $3 million. And so the board still is intending to discuss those recommendations and determine which of those you all want to add into the budget for this next year. So none of that is built into the preliminary budget today. Likewise, as we mentioned just a moment ago, we are still working on secondary staffing requests. There have been 31 high school teaching positions added into the budget to give teachers their daily conference period back. But what you see in the budget right now assumes that there's no cap in place on any of the core classes. So that is something that we're still working through because, as I said, the high schools are having seeing a problem in trying to schedule within that cap without needing a significant number of additional positions. Also on here, we have capital needs. There's nothing in the budget for capital type purchases. Over the last 4 years, we have really deferred all of our capital purchases. Some we were able to put into a bond package, others we have just done without. And I've got a list here itemizing capital items that need to be considered as to how we could fund them. These are one-time purchases. They could come from fund balance. They could come from gas funds. We could look at some different ways to fund those. But these are some equipment needs that we have for this upcoming year. We received some information 2 days ago that may impact our general operating fund budget. We were told 2 days ago, after the preliminary budget had been distributed to the board members, that the federal government will sequester, is the term they use, sequester or reduce discretionary funds beginning in January of 2013. This goes back to the super committee that met last year. The Budget Control Act of 2011 that was passed last year called for that committee to be formed and called for that committee to identify reductions to the federal budget. And there was a provision within that act that said that if that committee failed to identify reductions to the budget, then these spending reductions would automatically go into effect in January of 2013. So this appears that is where we may be headed. The super committee, as we all know, was not able to come to any agreement, make any recommendations on how to reduce the federal budget. And so, again, we may be headed towards a reduction in some of our federal funding. These reductions will only be avoided if Congress takes some sort of action now to reverse that particular provision of the Act and do away with the sequestering provision. There are various estimates that exist right now as to how those funds will be sequestered. It varies between department areas within the budget, within the federal budget. But the estimates range that we've seen in the last few days range anywhere from 8.4% to 9.1% is what different groups are projecting. TEA is now telling Title I program directors that they should plan to set aside 10% of their Title I allotments to prepare for this. The two big grants that we have that may be affected by this are our Title I grant and our IDEA-B grant. And IDEA-B is a special ed federal grant. They may have trouble absorbing those set-asides. Also, we've got another issue that is complicated by those set-asides, and that is that those two grants may also not be able to absorb any kind of a pay raise should one be granted in this upcoming year. Again, that's partly because of the set-asides that we were just talking about, and also because over a period of time, we have these particular grants have come to fund more and more positions. There's very little in these grants that's not payroll at the moment. And those decisions have been made over the years as we identified needs for positions, especially on the special ed grant. And we said we can't afford to add those in the general fund. So we look for opportunity to fund them through grant funds, and that's how we were able to add a number of positions. So over time, it's got to a point where the vast majority of the grant entitlement has been spent on payroll. So they're now at a point where, especially given the set-aside, this potential set-aside, they may have difficulty in absorbing any sort of salary increase. And on the, especially on the special ed grant, the IDEA grant, even without that set-aside, I think they were going to have a very hard time in absorbing any pay increase that might be granted for next year. Now, I will tell you that the information we got this week is still very preliminary about these grants. TEA has not even released the grant entitlements yet. We are making some projections here, as you'll see on the next slide, based on our projections of what those entitlements might be. We are projecting right now that for Title I, the gap in funding, if you will, may be as high as about $1.6 million, with another potential gap of $1.8 million in the IDEA-B program. And so the total impact could be $2.7 million, the total gap in funding on these grants. So then we have to look at, okay, how do we address that? What can we do to address and absorb that type of funding gap? And our options are pretty limited. I mean, we either eliminate positions that are funded out of those grants, and you can only do that to the extent that it is permitted under Chapter 21 of the Texas Education Code, because many of these people who are employed in the grants do have Chapter 21 contracts. Or we could absorb the funding gap into the general operating fund, or some combination of both even. So those are things that we will be watching. We are continuing to try to obtain some more information on these particular situations, especially the federal sequestering of funds. And as we get that information, we will certainly revise our estimates and come back with a better number for you. So our next steps, where we are now, again, we need to finalize secondary staffing for the teaching positions at the high schools. When we receive our May 15th preliminary property values, we will update the budget for those values. And then we have opportunity again with this board to discuss the preliminary budget in more detail. And certainly the board will be discussing Financial Futures Committee recommendations. Ultimately, we have to adopt the budget by the end of June. And so we will have to hold a public hearing prior to the time the budget is adopted in order to give the public opportunity to comment formally on the budget. So we would recommend having that particular hearing on June 21st at the regular board meeting that evening. And then we will actually not adopt our tax rate until August, after we receive the certified property values in July. So that's where we are today, and I'll be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Ms. Powell. Appreciate your work and the work of all the staff members. They live for this, don't they?
Oh, they do.
Yeah,
They love budgets.
It's why we get up every morning.
just for that, huh?
We live pitiful lives.
Let me ask one question, and I'll go to Dr. Rush. Could you go back to one of the first slides, which was the personnel that are being added back in? Is there a little rationale for adding in the assistant principals, other than that we feel like they're needed?
Administration has had significant conversation over that, and we feel like, yes, that is something that our junior highs and our alternative schools have a very significant need for. I don't know if you want to address that further.
You know, we've been going through this for a year, and I'll take venture first, and Mr. DeMore, and we have a lot of intakes out there, and there's a lot of special needs there, and Mr. DeMore has basically been doing it on his own and has done a great job. But there have been times that he's just been, too many things to do with the amount of time that he had. And same thing at Newcomer with the number of students that are coming in and leaving that program. I've had long conversations with both the principals and what their needs are, and when you do evaluations of teachers and all the different things that come up that that take their time away from, and then they're also doing the things that the assistant principal have done. Assistant principals to junior highs, we've had conversations with our junior high principals about that, and there is a need for that additional person or that position that was greater than what we anticipated when we made the recommendation last year. So we're recommending that we be added back.
Dr. Reich, let's provide an opportunity for everybody to ask some questions tonight. So if you want to ask a couple of questions, go ahead, and then we'll move it along. Yeah, really.
Yes, sir, President Barron. Let's see. Where do I begin after that? One question or one request I would have regarding these new positions that would be helpful for me as one trustee, but I don't want to request this if it's not everybody's interest, but to have, when there's anything new that's added into the budget, like new positions, if we could have a synopsis or a justification, just some background information on these things, I think that would save a lot of our time up here and asking, well, why this and why this and why this. So I don't know if that's something that everybody up here is interested in, but I think that would be helpful to facilitate a speedier process. Mm-hmm. Okay. Another request is, when breaking out the tables and the graphs, that show what we have as far as our fund balance. I know technically it's accurate in the dollars, but that also includes like the gas money and those types of things in there. Is that right?
The chart that we were looking at a minute ago is just the general fund.
Just the general fund?
All of these presentations are general fund only.
Okay. So the fund balance number, it doesn't include the gas
No.
money in there, so that's
No,
a true?
it does not.
Okay, well, we're better than I thought. Okay, well, strike that then. The other question I have is on for the secondary, this budget was prepared without the cap. If there is no cap, then is that essentially what we're looking at as far as positions?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Let's see, just two more. The AEDs, 79 AEDs for $90,000. I thought that what we had done with the previous two approvals over this year got us up to a safe level. So what's the extra 79
Well, what we
for?
did back last fall, we identified a need to add AEDs to improve life safety
Right.
response time in our
Right.
schools. And we determined then that we could not afford to buy, or we didn't think we could afford to buy all of them at once. And so we bought half this year, and this is the other half. And I think we said to the board that we were going to do that. We were going to buy half out of the 11-12 year, and we would put the other half into this next year's budget.
But didn't we have, I thought we did two separate
Well, I think probably
times.
what you're thinking of, there were two items brought to the board. The first was a budget change to put money out there for this, and then when we bid the AEDs, we brought the bid back, so you saw it twice.
Okay, maybe that's what it was. Okay. Okay. And actually, the last one I had was what Mr. Barron already addressed. That's all I have. Thanks.
Yeah, Mr. Hibbs.
Thank you, Ms. Powell. So potential funding gaps, where it says the Title I and the IDEA B grants, that $2.6 million there, is that the 10% that's suggested that we should be keeping
Right,
to the
that's the
side?
10%, and it's also an estimate on the a salary gap. I mean, if we were to give a salary increase, we have factored that in here as to what that potential gap might be, total gap.
Okay, so, okay.
I can break that down for you. So here.
Only if it's accessible. Excuse me.
The 10% amount is $1.4 million for Title I, and $924,000 for the IDEA B.
Okay. I don't have a problem with the assistant principals and the reinstatement there. I think that's one that we should look at. I know that Ms. Sullins would like to talk about secondary teachers and staffing there, so I don't want to touch on that one because I probably will have comments on it here in a few minutes. But under the FFC recommendations that you have listed there, of that $3 million, and we're going to have a work session on the financial futures recommendations that'll be forthcoming. But this number here, that $3 million, is that primarily in guidance text?
I believe about half of it was guidance text. $1,654,000 was guidance text. There was another $268,000 for reinstating junior high receptionist.
Okay.
And then there was a position for a virtual classroom coordinator and TAs.
Okay.
To man the rooms, the virtual learning room. So I think those were the personnel units in
Right.
those recommendations.
I did review the different options that they had there, and I wasn't here at the last meeting when the FFC actually presented. Was there any discussion of possibly using guidance techs that would be almost like as if they were on a block schedule themselves and maybe being shared between two campuses, like at the elementary campus?
The FFC themselves actually discussed that, and part of the struggle there is everybody's testing at the same time, and so you really need that guidance tech at each campus at the same time, and so that's really not very practical.
Okay. And my question would be then, though, is that we're not always testing. We're only testing on certain occasions. Are we looking to put guidance techs into a position, or bringing them back? And I would be for bringing them back if it would be to have them maybe to do front office and guidance techs responsibilities. I don't know that we could bring both of them back. You know, somebody floated the idea to me the other day and suggested that what the counselors need is just relief from all these ancillary things that they're doing so they can get back to counseling and at non-testing times. So that's why I was wondering if that would be practical of being able to, you know, have a guidance tech on a campus for 2 days and then on a sister campus for 2 days, and then they rotate every other Friday.
The committee actually discussed both those possibilities, either sharing
Okay.
between campuses or splitting time. And Dr. Cavazos, you want to address that?
That was part of the discussion about going to several campuses, and kind of an alternative to that was discussed was maybe at peak times when there is a certain amount of testing, either local testing or state testing, that might be an option for hiring or contracting during peak time, as opposed to trying to split one with two campuses because they're both testing at the same time. So everybody gets somebody during peak time was discussed to some extent. I think the concerns that came about regarding that, which I think can be overcome with some planning and et cetera, is the training of those individuals, the stability of the contract person that comes in during peak time. But campuses indicated that they have people who regularly, you know, assist in subs and things like that. So it'd take an effort to get the right people at peak times to provide the relief.
Okay.
And that was more desirable, I think, than the sharing between campuses because they're both testing at the same time.
Okay. Thank you.
Mrs. Sullins.
Thank you, President Barron. Ms. Powell, thank you for this budget preparation. I know we're back at that time of year again, and
Sooner than ever.
It always comes back. And I had first something I wanted to clarify. The new positions that are listed, are those already incorporated into the
Yes.
budget?
Yes.
Okay. So the $3.6 million is already in the numbers?
Yes.
Okay, good. And I see that we have, on this first cut, surplus of about $8.4 million. But we have a tremendous amount of competing needs for finite resources. And when I start looking that we have $2 million in capital needs, $3 million potential in FFC, 3.1 to 4.7 in counselors, 2.7 potentially in the funding gap for IDEA and Title I. And of course, discussion of a raise, we're going to get past that $8.4 million in a big hurry. I mean, there's, you know, all of those items are not going to fit within that budget surplus. So I'm looking forward to the discussion this board's going to have and community input as we go forth to make the budget for this year. When you put the positions in the budget, does that allow the campuses to deliver the same service level? Are we reducing any courses or any AP or AVID or fine arts or athletics, or it'll be the same service level?
We've staffed our schools at the ratio that the board approved, and then the schools will make their selections based on their course request. And so we've raised the class average, and so they're having to work within the units that are available to them, and it's they're having to staff a little differently and schedule a little differently. But in terms of reducing programs or eliminating programs, they're not doing that.
Or access to programming.
Right.
So if,
Right.
if a student wants to take, for example, choir or
Right.
band or something like that, they'd still be able to do that at the same level in this particular budget.
Yes.
Okay. And I wanted to respond to my colleague, Mr. Hibbs, on the testing and the guidance text. I know we'll have a tremendous amount of discussion on that, but just for the evening, testing has become a year-round process, and it does have peak seasons. I've been following this this year, and what I see is that when we have also the curriculum assessments, we're going to have to consider that to be another peak time. So I'd like to see how we can save as much money as possible while delivering the very best service to support our counselors. But I believe, our testing schedule has just expanded and expanded. So I look forward to, more conversations to see what the will of the board is on that particular topic. But hats off to counselors and campuses for dealing with what you have done this year. I don't think I have any other particular questions on this right now. Thank you.
Mr. Hawk.
Thank you, President Barron. Just think, Ms. Powell, last year we were cutting $23 million out of the budget.
We were.
So I'd rather make these decisions, even though it's not going to be a lot easier. It's definitely, last year was one of the hardest budget
Right.
seasons.
Absolutely.
I know we've been through, and I know you guys
Yeah.
went through it last year. So, Ms. Solons, just a response real quick to that. Like many things, things just start growing, and I feel that's what testing's done. And so I think you're exactly right I don't know what the exact solution is right now, but I definitely know paying our counselors to do all the testing coordination, I don't think is the right solution. So I think we've got to explore what's the right piece for this district as a whole. Ms. Powell, the next thing I'm going to talk about real briefly, because I know we're going to have many discussions during this budget season, so kind of consider this like a prep night for you guys. Get your analyst in the back typing real fast and working. So the one question I ask, and I'm always leery, and we started this when the ARA funding started coming in on the grants. We start talking Title I and IDEA-B. I'm leery because they're always federal funding. And the Fed loves to give and taketh away. And it sounds like that's what they're doing. With that, and Title I always seems to kind of live in this little bubble that's never truly monitored and truly looked at. And Ms. Powell, I would ask, how many of these positions, if this funding comes in, and I know most of them are through personnel, could be absorbed or moved into positions that we currently need to fill for this next year?
And I can't answer that particular question tonight. That is something that we certainly are going to have to look at.
And when you start looking at that, I would definitely like, and I don't want a line item, I don't want to get into the line item pieces on that, but I definitely think if we can have maybe broken down by categories of where the funding is, whether it's, certain type of positions, because Title I funding is supposed to be for funding that the district would not normally
Right, supplemental.
fund. That's
It
right,
has to be something
supplemental
it
funding
cannot supplant.
is what it's there for. And I know many of our schools use it very differently. Boy, I think it makes a big difference on many times. Some schools use it for personnel, some schools have used it for equipment. Then it's things that we normally wouldn't be able to have. And so if we can get just maybe a category breakdown of where it's spent, I don't think we need line item each person, but just a general idea of where all that Title I funding is going to. I think that'll help us start making some decisions as we go down the road.
Sure.
That's all I have.
Mrs. Pena.
Mrs. Powell, you referred to the fact that we had set the cap on classroom size. And in doing so, along our other journeys that we've been going through, we had, or at least I had an opportunity to talk to 4 of our 6 high school principals. And we have created an unintended consequence in making that move. So I think it's something we're probably going to have to revisit. And the best way of explaining it, an example that was given was that, let's say we have an AP course, and we say we only want 24 students in that class. In reality, in their planning, what they were doing was putting 36 students in that class initially, at the beginning of the class time, or the school start year. But within 6 weeks, so many students dropped out of the AP course, they were down to 22 students in that class, which was within the cap we were trying to place. But because we're now putting a cap on the initial part of it, they're having to hire to cover the difference, and then we're overstaffing. And so I think in us putting that cap on them, we've created an unintended consequence that perhaps we should relook at and see that perhaps we should give them a timeline in which they will get down to a certain level rather than capping them totally and saying there's no variance authorized. So I think that's something we really need to look at, and perhaps that'll help us with the hiring and so on that we're doing.
I'd like to address that as we get to the financial futures recommendation later on this evening, which is an action item. We can actually fix that tonight.
Great.
Okay.
Thank you.
I was going to give Dr. Reich another chance, but he doesn't have his light on, so I'll go. All right. Move, huh? Wow. Was there any consideration of adding back in the pre-K and K teaching assistants?
No, we have not brought that forward.
Okay. How about funding for any of the strategic plan? Did any
There's nothing
that
in here
flow through?
related to that.
Okay. Consideration for reinstating the library director of the libraries.
No, I think that we felt like that is being handled appropriately, I think, or adequately at the moment through the curriculum department.
Okay.
And we had, we were prioritizing requests, and so I think that we felt that one was covered.
Since there will be plenty of fingers looking for that $8 million, could we get a dollar sign on what it would cost to reinstate the insurance benefits that went away last year?
To completely reinstate them?
Yes.
Yes, absolutely. May have that here. To completely restore it would be $1.7 million. And that would restore the contribution to $260 per month for all plan participants. And that's based on our current plan enrollment.
Okay, thank you. And what would a 2% pay raise cost?
2% pay raise would cost a little over $6 million.
Mm-hmm. I'm only asking these questions because I know they're going to come up. And the next one probably isn't for you, but maybe from Mr. Harvey. As we move towards more and more online testing for the standardized tests, are we capable in all or most of our buildings to do that, which would relieve a lot of the guidance tech problems of paper tests?
Right now, we still aren't at the position where we would be able to test all students simultaneously. We do some things like tell-pass testing where we have windows of time and we can cycle students through over that window. But for the STAR test, for instance, where they're given on a specific day, we do not have the capability to do that simultaneously.
Do we know when all of it's going to go online? Dr. Cavazos, do you know that? No. Okay, because our retesters test online now.
They have that option, yes.
Okay. That's it. Thank you for you. Mrs. Sullins.
Ms. Powell, as we go through the budgeting process, I'm sitting here working on how much surplus we have, and we're looking at the number of ideas we're talking about bringing forth. I think it'd be helpful if we had a chart that we could, as we go through the process, keep a running total We think we're projected of 8.4, but we're spending this, and so we figure out how much we have, because I'm looking at $18.4 million of suggestions right now on $8.4 million surplus. So,
We have that, so.
okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Powell. And I'll just say that it's my opinion that testing is a ongoing, never-ending, hopeless, thankless task that we live with all year long. You can tell I just love it. Yeah. That's it. Next is a discussion action item to consider Financial Futures Committee recommendations, and I have a request from the chair of the board committee, Mr. Pompa, to withdraw most of this, and we will address the Financial Futures recommendations at a board work session. However, I'm going to leave the item on here so that we can discuss the high school staffing, and if we need to, make an adjustment to that right now. What Mrs. Pena said is exactly correct, that because of what we did to the high schools, we got a request for something like 71 additional teachers just due to the fact that we capped the high schools, and that didn't seem right. Mrs. Sullins, you want to talk about this? Okay. Well, your light's on. Mr. McCullough.
We are in the middle of a study, though, of our staffing by Moat Casey that should be coming back next week. Is that correct, Ms. Powell? Yes. And we'll have a little bit better idea there. But we are in a holding pattern as far as the staffing and giving our principals to go ahead in these areas. So I just want to say that, that was 71, but we're trying to determine if everything was done correctly, and so anyway, that's just something we have ongoing right now.
Okay. I think what we looked at, what the principals brought to us was that if they were given the leeway to overpopulate classes with the understanding that the numbers would come down to whatever cap we gave them, and give them a reasonable time frame in which to get to the cap, whether it's end of the first quarter or even at the semester, they could live with that, and this number for 71 new teachers might just vanish. And we could allow that to happen right now, and then Moat Casey can give us make sure the high schools are doing what they do correctly.
We would.
Would you go for that?
We would go for that.
Can I get a motion in that regard? Let's hear it.
Okay. I'd like to enter a motion to authorize the superintendent or his designee to waive the core class cap requirement for the 2012-2013 school year
Second.
at the high school. Yeah.
Who was it? Same? Okay. Motion by Ms. Sullins, second by Dr. Reich to do that. Discussion? Please vote. Okay, Mr. Superintendent, you got your waiver? I think that'll help a lot. Thank you. I have lights on. Mrs. Sullins? Okay. Mr. Hogg? Okay, Mr. Hogg.
Thank you, President Barron. I do have, that waiver I think is a great thing we're implementing right now, but I do think we all realize it's to get us to the next stage of where we're going down that. So we still have to go through the process. And I said this at a meeting a while ago, and Ms. Powell, this is when I start as a board member and our fiscal responsibility start getting real nervous when we have staffing situations we're working through. So I know you guys are feverishly working on those, but our neighbors to the east and west of us both had major newspaper coverage when they make big staffing mistakes. So please, if you need outside sources to come in and assist on that, I'm glad y'all brought in Moat Casey. If there's other pieces, come back to us and ask, because these are there's nothing more critical from a fiscal responsibility than making those kind of commitments and decisions. Just a quick report, Mr. Pomp is not here, of the work session of where we can go. Ms. Solons and Mr. Pomp and I serve on that committee. Just to let the board know, we've met, we had the chair of the Financial Futures Committee with us. We went down through all their recommendations, and we're gonna be bringing those back to the board. I know they were sent out today, and it shows kind of where we're looking to study, what builds into the strategic plan that we're working on, and then also what we think can take board action. So that's how we'd like to address it in the work session. Mr. Pompa has done an outstanding job of really driving the FFC forward on that. So it's been a wonderful committee, and they put a lot of hard work, and I think citizens have some really good ideas to look at those. Yeah, and we do have some members here from the FFC, and I thank you for being here tonight. We have many more discussions over FFC items, so thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hogg. Mrs. Pena.
I just want to thank the principals for coming forward and identifying something in specific that brought it right to the forefront, that we had done something unintendedly to create a problem, which we certainly don't want to do, and that they were really wanting to work towards keeping our costs down, because that's exactly what that did. It will help us to keep our costs down, and it was a great example of us having to make a change, which we'll probably do for the next year, change things that we did last year to mitigate the funding issue. And now we see the light at the end of the tunnel, so I think there'll be a lot more relief this year for our principals and the schools, the teachers. I'm hoping that will come. We certainly appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Pena. Next item on the agenda is Student Code of Conduct. Mr. McCullough.
Thank you, Mr. Barron. You have the copy of the Student Code of Conduct that you received a week ago, and this was the changes in here were done through a committee of teachers, students, administrators, parents. Mrs. Muldrew, our discipline coordinator, was working with the committee, and this is a process that we've gone through for many years, and but really we don't have a presentation to go through every one of these pages, but if you have questions for Mrs. Muldrew or Mr. Walker or anyone on staff, we'll be glad to answer them at this time.
Good evening, Ms. Muldrew. How are you doing?
Good evening, sir. I'm well. How are you?
Thank you for doing this, because I
welcome.
wouldn't want to. Questions? Dr. Reich.
Thank you, President Barron. Thank you for going through this. This is always a huge project, and takes a lot of attention to detail. On our copy, if we could look at page 13, this is where things are redlined and changed from serious misbehavior to severe. And then it states in the new edition in this FAQ, serious misbehavior is used in its common meaning and not referring to the defined term. On pages 94 and 95, I was wondering, it seems kind of confusing to me. Why do we have to even state that, especially if in looking at all this, all of the serious has been changed to severe, so it's technically a different term anyway. So can you explain some of the background of why we're changing the nomenclature, and if we even need some of this that seems kind of confusing or redundant to me?
Yes, sir. On this page, we were going to go with the term serious versus severe, because when serious is defined, severe is used as one of the words to define the word serious. With the legislative update, serious and persistent misbehavior talks about offenses that include Title V felonies. And we use serious misbehavior on page 13 to talk about the seriousness from one group 1 to group 2 to group 3 and 4. and so the strikeout here for serious was supposed to be taken away and leave for serious and not severe.
So everywhere we see severe, so it's actually reversed?
Yes, sir. The intent was
that
to
explains a
reverse
lot.
it.
Okay. Okay. Well, that definitely explains it, because there was a complete mismatch there.
Yes, sir.
Okay, okay. Well, thank you for that clarification.
You're welcome.
I've got a few.
I've got a question. So it should read the most serious misbehavior
Yes, sir.
instead of the most severe?
Yes, sir.
And is that, how many times is that in here? Is that just on that one page, or?
That's on page 13, and then we have it on,
Is it, I mean,
it's on page 13, and then we have the definition in the
Okay.
back.
so it's not, it's just on this one page,
Yes, sir.
and so it should say serious.
It should say serious instead of severe.
So the old language was severe, is that?
No, sir, the old language was serious.
It was serious already?
Yes, sir.
So severe was just a, okay.
Still, y'all considered severe, and
We
then
considered-
it did not get changed?
Yes, sir.
Back to this copy.
Okay.
Yes, sir. That is correct.
Well, I don't consider any of that very serious or severe, just a typo thing.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Okay. On page 19, I was just curious, on the FAQs, number 28, how are major life activities defined? Where is that sourced to be included in an FAQ? Is that like a special needs type of thing, or how does that become an FAQ? I wouldn't think of that as a parent, major life activities. It's obviously got to be sourced from somewhere. I just don't know what it is.
The 504
It is 504.
legislation, yes, sir, has changed.
Okay, and so we're just adding the new things there.
Yes, sir.
Perfect, okay. Page 24, under Group 2, the red line. Well, I actually have a question above the red line, bullet that says, discipline infractions may include or are not limited to campus possession, distribution, or posting of magazines, books, electronic data, or printed material not appropriate for school. Is that just up to an individual's interpretation as far as what material is not appropriate for school, or how is that defined for clarity?
That thought process, sir, was, it's left up mostly to the school, but anything that depicts the violence, drugs and alcohol that's not appropriate, then we take, those are considered infractions.
Okay. And then on the red line, down below, drawing depicting tobacco, drugs, alcohol, gangs, guns, weapons, or violent activity on self, notebook, or other student materials. I was curious as far as student materials, what that can be argued is or isn't student materials, but I was more, not to get stuck in these details, is there a way for some of these items to, where we can have an overarching statement or a blanket statement that discusses physical or manual and electronic, so that we don't have to try so hard to specify every which scenario? Is there something we can add into the code of conduct just to cover all the bases automatically?
Yes, sir, we can work on that.
Okay.
A lot of, as this code of conduct has evolved over the years, and we have situations that come up that people question or bring appeals to the administration and even to the board. We have to make sure, as in the student code of conduct, and so it does get wordy, and it has over the years, but a lot of times it's necessary because of the interpretation of what an overriding a statement might be, and I would rather not have a code of conduct that this detail, but in a lot of ways we have been forced to do this due to situations that have occurred. Just like on other student materials, that can be wide open because every day something new comes in that we have to deal with. Yeah. So, I mean, that's the reason that we have to keep changing this every year to address some of these issues. And sometimes we address it not as clear as it should be, and we're trying to clear that up. So
Sure. Well, thank you. Let's see. I only have a couple others here. On page 29, under the Group 4 disciplinary consequences, the bottom bullet on the page, referral to appropriate law enforcement agencies such as CPS or fire department, just seemed odd to me that we don't have police department in there. I mean, it's just a such as, so it doesn't really matter. I just thought that might be something just to automatically put in there that we're working with our, sorry, Spence, our police.
Yes, sir.
Okay. I have others, but I will defer to let other people take a crack at this, and then I'll jump in if people haven't covered it.
Well, thank you. Mrs. Sullins.
Thank you, President Barron. I have two questions this evening. One on page 5, there's a discussion of the property search for students, especially their automobiles. And I don't have any concerns with the language that's in here, but I wanted to talk. I've had opportunity to talk to parents over the last couple of years when their student's car was searched. So, the dog might have pointed to their car, and the student is brought out of class, and the vehicle search ensues, and doesn't find anything, but what the student is left with is a car that's somewhat dismantled. Air conditioning vents out, maybe radios and components out, and then, all the people who are searching the vehicle leave, and the student's left with inoperable items. Do we have a process or a procedure to prevent that from happening? Because that can cause students to incur cost.
Yes, ma'am. Mr. Walker.
Wow.
I know whenever a dog hit up on the vehicle, there could have been something there, maybe at some time or another, that made them hit on that vehicle, and that's when a lot of times we will call a police officer in to help do the search and seizure on that vehicle. So a lot of times that is the police officer's discretion to go in and maybe dismantle the car. So
right. Sometimes it's a used car and the students bought it, but the police dog points on it. But at the end of the day, the student is left with a car that's gone through the appropriate search, but has then portions of their car dismantled. Is that under our purvey, or is that under the cities?
it would be the city,
Okay.
and that is something that we can talk with Lieutenant Brown about
Okay.
to see if they can handle that
Okay.
differently. All right.
Very, very good. And then had my second question is really to the administration's thought on with our cell phone policy, and if our cell phone policy impedes teachers from including smartphones capacity for educational purposes. And if so, if the district thinks it'd be problematic for the district to remove the $15 penalty and perhaps use a site-based or whatever recommendation the district may have to address misuse through citizenship grades or other items, so that the students and the teachers could have the benefit of the educational use. I don't have a recommendation. I'm asking the superintendent
Right.
for his, yep.
Well, the use of cell phones, the capabilities of cell phones have changed tremendously since this policy was written. I remember listening to the board discuss cell phones, and they were fairly common, but they couldn't. I mean, you could call somebody, or you could answer somebody basically what the cell phone was doing at that time. But now you can. I mean, we all know what they can do. I mean, if you can find out any information that's by Googling, on your cell phone, and we probably all used it in some form or fashion today, every one of us, to get some information besides just making and receiving a phone call or texting. The Rangers aren't playing tonight, so we're not keeping up with that, but it does give you the Ranger score, play by play, pitch by pitch. But I've been studying this myself, and Mr. Harvey and I have had some conversations about it, and Dr. Cavazos and I, about how things have changed. And I know some school districts have eased up on their policy as far as having cell phones on campus and having them on type of deal. It's a two-edged sword, but I think as we move forward, in a lot of things we want to do in a strategic plan as far as technology, we're going to have to look at it real closely and carefully, and then we're also going to have the procedures in place to address the misuse of the cell phones. Now, is our cell phone policy outdated? Yes. I think we're really going to have to look at how we can use personal devices in the future in the classroom. So I don't have a recommendation tonight except a possibility that we study it really carefully and bring back a recommendation to the board. I just know that there is a movement across the state, across the nation, to let students use it more.
Mr. Hibbs.
How are you?
I'm good, sir.
You didn't get to be part of a little tirade I threw in the back during our dinner session. This is something I'm very passionate about.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Superintendent, if we already know that our cell phone policy is outdated, we need to go ahead and get on it. We just need to get on it. There's districts across the state that are already allowing their kids to use them for their uses for the calculator, for the internet. These things are portable mini computers, and I know that there's some security guards that'll take them up in a minute, and there's other security guards that won't. I would lie to you if I tell you that I don't get a text from my daughter every once in a while from school. And she is, and I can tell you that I've broken our own policy and I texted her back. So I get text, but she gets caught, I pay $15. So that goes back to the basis of what part of my concern here is. And in page 53, it talks a lot about the dress code. And Ms. Pena made the comment about it during our dinner meeting, that the code of conduct should be the basis of what we expect and our expectations of the students when they come to school. This code of conduct should not be lessened at the campus level. It can always be strengthened, but it should never be lessened from the campus level. I'm a firm believer that we need to support our teachers in promoting this code of conduct, so their classrooms, our students are prepared to come to the class and learn. If we should not be tolerating disruptive students in the class just because the office doesn't want to deal with them. And if that's an issue because central administration or they don't feel that the board's supporting them, we need to fix that. When I look at the areas here on page 53, we'll go with the mouth grills. They're not permitted, period. It says the determination of what constitutes grills is within the discretion of the principals. Well, we just said that they're not tolerated, but we're saying that the principals has a discretion. We say no gauging. Principals will deal with gauging on a case-by-case basis. We just said no gauging, but now we're saying the principals are going to deal with that on these type of things. We either say no to them or we take them out, I think. Or we just go and we say gauging, principals will deal on a case-to-case basis. Don't put no in there because we're given this representation that we're not going to tolerate it. Same thing, you know, with tattoos, all visible or piercings. We know that that's being abused, but yet we say we're not going to tolerate it. But we actually do. I would suggest that we look back over these things, and wherever we have to go and say it's going to be dealt by the principal, and I have no problem with the principal dealing with these things, but let's not put the principal in the position where they're going to soften the restrictions, and then when the general public sees people, a campus full of kids with sagging pants, say, I know the school district has a policy on that. Well, it can't be allowable on one campus and not on another. I don't care what ethnicity we are. I don't care, you know, what social economic, you know, or fluency that any one of us come by. I dealt with my own child in junior high wanting to have sagging pants, and I always made sure that they were pulled up, but that's another issue. I just think that we have to have a constant policy, and I'd like to see our code of conduct be reflective from school to school, campus to campus, administrator by administrator, and just saying, this is what we expect. I don't expect teachers to send kids up to the office because they don't have their pencil or their pen. Just provide them. But I do expect that if a teacher is sending a disruptive student to the front office, that they're not merely told by the principal, don't do it again and go back and sit back in your class. I want us to abide by the policies and the codes that we put in here, and I think by that, we then set the example of our expectations that we want these children to abide by. And I think that's where true learning begins. So that's my thoughts.
You want to fix all that for us? Mr. Hogg.
Thank you, President Barron. First question I'll ask for code of conduct is, we're not printing one of these for every single student, correct?
That is correct, sir. We are not.
Good, so it's all electronic.
Yes, sir.
So if throughout the year changes need to be made, they can always be made and corrected, especially if you want to lessen them, such as a cell phone policy, and make it softer as you go in. I don't think you can increase any penalties or rules, but we can because electronic always changes and it's not as drastic of a change, but we do have them sign a statement saying they receive this every year. So I'm glad we're not printing them. That's been a big push. On the same note, let me everyone talks about minimizing this book, and it's so long. How do we rule that out? I think you all know I would push for a uniform policy at any time, and we can eliminate a lot of that dress code policy in there, just move strictly to uniforms. I know Ms. Pena and I have had good discussions because we're on the same thought process on that many a times. In the last couple of years, we've tried to work through pushing that through. One piece I would say, Mr. Hibbs, I agree with you. If we're going to put, these should be the basic policies, and then schools can strengthen them. But I also look at it from the element of our police officers have a lot of laws, but they don't have to enforce every single one every single time. We have to be able to give our principals and our teachers the discretion to enforce things as they see needed in that classroom. They have a hard enough job as it is, and some of these things, let me tell you, drive me nuts when I see students doing it, but I also see the teachers and through the discussions of what they have to enforce. And do they make that decision of that student that they've been constantly battling with, working on, trying to get driven? Do they send them to the office every single day for those sagging pants every day and lose that kid, and that kid falls even farther behind in that subject? And so that's where I think, while I agree with you, I think we also have to have some leeway. And so I think your point of this could be a minimum process, and then each campus can increase that, I do think is a fair point, but I think we also have to give flexibility and leeway to our campus staff to make some of these decisions of what's occurring on each side.
That's why I was suggesting we take the no out in front of it. Just instead of gauging, principals determine, rather than saying no gaugings, because we're saying at that point they don't have an option.
Right.
So if you go back and you edit through this and take that mandate out in some of these areas that we feel we're going to lose on, let the principals have that authority and opportunity. Right now, with no in there, we're just saying it's cut and dry.
Okay. And I don't have a problem with that. I just think we have to, I always say, as we take into the code of conduct, it is there for, as you said, the basis. But at any policy, anything we create, I don't want common sense ever taken away from our principals and our staff on what they're doing. We have to allow common sense to play into a factor, because sometimes some of these rules we put in this code of conduct, like we just noted, the cell phone policy, it's outdated. When I was a junior in high school, never got in trouble here at Arlington High, I was sent to the principal's office 15 times for not shaving. Well, it was ridiculous. I tried to ask them how that affected, I could have a mustache, but I couldn't have anything on my chin. I didn't like facial hair. I was willing to shave, but it's also a 17-year-old rebellious attitude. It had nothing to do with the outcome of our education. And the next year, that policy was changed in that because of what was occurring. And so as these things start going through, we have to give that flexibility. We have to have that. And even if it's superintendent being able to amend things, make changes as the year goes on, and as you kind of said, mentioned, letting the principals have some of that decision, tweak the wording so that it can be campus decision. I think that's a fair idea, but we do have to have the flexibility to let people, and as Mr. Barron could probably tell you, being in the classroom, you pick your battles sometimes.
Mrs. Pena.
Well, I can see both your viewpoints. One of the things I really believe is, with Mr. Hibbs, what he had said, and it's along the lines of what your concerns were, Mr. Hogg, is that we have a perfect example of something that occurred where, with the cell phone issue, believe it or not, I don't know if it's still in effect. $15 was the max that we could fine them. I think at the time that we implemented it, some board members wanted it to be $50 to $100 because they wanted it to be severe, but the law did not allow it. The law said it could only be 15. That was the max. Just to give you some history on that. But there has been cases where a standardized, consistent issue or a rule that was made was not followed. In one high school in particular, there was a student who, as he would leave the building, would pick up his phone and start talking. He was still in the building, and he'd be calling his mother. And he did this every day for the first 6 weeks. The teachers who monitor it were different. So right along the 6th week, one of the teachers confiscated the phone from him for being on the phone and told him, you know better, you're not supposed to be on the phone. So his mother proceeded to become very upset because 6 weeks had passed. No one had acknowledged that it was against the code of conduct, and here this teacher had the nerve to take the phone away. So she wanted this teacher fired. Well, after a conversation with the parent, I explained to her that the teacher actually who took the phone away was correct in abiding by the code of conduct. All those other teachers who had been observing this the prior 6 weeks were actually in the wrong, according to the student code of conduct. Then she said, well, if it's in the code of conduct, he shouldn't have been doing it. I agree with you. And then proceeded to ask me about the teacher. Was this a good teacher? I don't want to hurt a good teacher. And I actually personally knew this teacher, and I said, yes, actually she's a very good teacher. So she said, okay, we'll make sure he doesn't stay on the phone. So this was a parent who was willing to go the other direction, but because there was no consistent application of the rule, the one teacher who was applying the rules got in trouble. So we have to have not just a rule that's enforceable, but one that is standard, has a standard practice of being enforced. As you had said in the work session, Mr. Hibbs, there's no point in having the code of conduct if we're not going to enforce it. So I understand that. This is not an easy book to have. You don't want to get into the trenches of everything. You don't want to get into eaches of it. But at some point in time, this has evolved because things have come up. But we do need to know when to pull back. And I do believe that the cell phone one is an antiquated rule that we have at this point in time, because we do know technology is here. But there's going to have to be the ability for the teachers to see when a student is texting, not paying attention. Of course, they can do it without even looking at you and do their texting. My daughter does it all the time, and she's talking to me and texting. So they're just born into this and very good at it. We're going to have to change that rule. How we do it, we'll need probably to get some information on what the instruction is going to entail, what we're going to use the tool for to make that determination, or give the call, as Mr. Hibbs and Mr. Hogg said, to the staff at the schools. But I think that's one of the ones that's here that we can't live with, and it does need to be changed. So I agree with you.
Dr. Rice.
Okay. Thank you, President Barron. I'll go through the last round of questions that I had. Should be pretty quick. Page 74 is the bottom of the page says first semester 81 days, second 96 days. Is that current to reflect the next calendar year?
Yes, sir, it is.
Okay. Okay, just making sure. Okay. And moving on to page 81. This is actually on page 80 and 81 talks about the determination by the board or the board's designee. Well, I won't assume, I'm asking just to ensure that the board's designee, it's probably already stipulated in policy that that would be our superintendent or his designee?
Yes, sir.
Okay, just making sure. And then on this particular bolded item on page 81, the red line, the determination by the Board of Trustees or the board's designee, i.e. superintendent, is final and may not be appealed. Is that in line with all of our policies regarding the students' or parents' rights as far as appealing up to the board if they don't agree with the superintendent or the investigation that's done at different stages?
This particular policy is different.
Okay.
It's new policy that has been adopted, and in our Texas Law Education Bulletin, it states in this particular law that the determination of the board or the Board of Trustees designee is final and may not be appealed. So this one particular section is different from the other appeals that we have.
Okay. Straight from the statute, our legal counsel saying behind us. Okay, that's great. That's what I needed to know there.
I think in this section, they're talking about the bully being transferred, not the
Correct.
bullyee.
This
Victim,
particular
thank you.
part.
Yeah, that particular part, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Page 84, everything's been redlined, taken out on insurance may be purchased by parent or guardian. I would assume then we are not offering that as an optional coverage or service anymore?
Yes, sir, that is correct.
Okay. And why is that? Is that something that we can't afford to do, or is no longer something that we are able to provide? Or is it just not necessary?
Well, there was very little people actually taking the insurance, and I believe it was the cost, or is it a legal issue? I see the attorney headed down there, but
It's, and Cindy may be able to help me, but it's nothing we ever paid for. It was a separate company that offered this insurance, and it's
and
nothing.
they didn't want to bring it back to us. Is that correct?
It may have been. Does anybody know?
My understanding that, and I could be wrong, is that there was such a small enrollment that it wasn't profitable for the companies to even come in and offer it. And so that's the way I remember it. And so we don't offer it anymore. We used to hand that
And
packet out.
it's not we. I mean, it was
it's
this
a company
company that offered it.
But we used to provide a packet to every student the first day of school.
And it has to do with the fact that we're
Right.
generally immune when it comes to personal injury, and if you don't have any other coverage for your child, and this was something that you could get for your child. I mean, if your child falls on our playground, we're immune, we can't pay.
But
It's, it's a gift of
It was a
public
company
funds.
decision, not a district decision.
So,
Okay. Okay, that's great. Thank you. Okay, two more sections. Page 87, there's a purple line. Not sure why the color changes there. Don't really care. In the middle of that paragraph, under number 1, there's a typo I noticed. Do you see that? To hasv
Yeah.
instead of to have, so it's just a typo.
Yes, sir.
Okay, and then regarding this definition of bullying, we talk about expression through electronic means. Physical conduct occurs on school property, school-sponsored events, related activities, in a vehicle operated by the district. What about the internet? What can we do legally, and that might be for Ms. Castillo to address this, specifically with bullying? There's a lot of situations that we hear about in the media where children are bullied via Facebook. It's not done on school grounds. It's done at home. It's done wherever it's done, but it obviously affects those kids. It's ended up in suicides in
Right.
situations. Not here, thankfully. What is our legal reach to be able to put something like that in here to let our students know, don't do this?
right. It's a really hard question, and the law is kind of a mess, although it's becoming a little clearer. I mean, the Supreme Court, in the last couple of months, refused to sort of clear it up for us, and different circuits have come to different decisions about how much reach out can a school make, outside of, school grounds to discipline or take any kind of, action against a student that does something that's not necessarily at school or on school grounds or not using a school computer. And first of all, as far as the definition of bullying in the back, now we've been given a statutory definition that we can't mess
Okay.
with. But in the technology section of the Student Code of Conduct, and then in our board policies in the legal section, there's a sort of there's a statement of the law, if I can find that. The general rule is still some 1960s case law, that deals with material and substantial disruption. And so something that happens off campus but somehow makes its way to school, and there are lots of different cases and lots of different examples, but let's say you're bullying. If something is happening on Facebook and the kids aren't doing it during the school day, what we would need from parents is they would need to show us, they would need to, first tell us that it's happening. The least we can do, and I give this advice all the time, and our principals and assistant principals know this, the very least we can do, even if we don't think we can legally mete out discipline, we call those kids in, we call their parents in, see what this happened over the weekend, see what your daughter posted to this other girl and how hateful it is, stop it. And just kind of let everybody know and ask for everybody's cooperation. We may not be able to mete out discipline, put a kid in choices or turning point for it, but the least we can do is have a conversation, send kids to the counselor, that kind of thing. But we would need to see that a Facebook post, a tweet, an email, any of those things that are happening online are materially or substantially disrupting the school environment for a student. I mean, you can see some severe examples where you've got kids that just refuse to come to school, or they're, it isn't making its way to school because they're being bombarded with, hateful things at school. Everybody's talking at school about something they saw online this weekend. We've got cases where kids are threatening the school on Facebook on the weekends. I'm coming to school on Monday, and that's one exception to the material or substantial disruption. If something is a true threat, if we think it's a true threat, then you don't have to go into whether or not there was material or substantial disruption. But if it's not a true threat, you look at material or substantial disruption, and sometimes it's gray. But we encourage kids and parents to report problems like that, and again, the very least that we do is inform parents, ask parents for help, ask students to stop, and we investigate all those claims. And we have people bring in printouts from Facebook all the time. But so we do have some authority, and even if we can't discipline, in some situations we ask parents for their help. But in the technology section, there's a discussion of material and substantial disruption under the technology regulation on 54.
Okay.
So
Okay.
it's the lawyer answer. It depends. So.
All right. Well, that's fair enough. Obviously, I know that we're going to do what we need to do in the district to protect our kiddos. And I don't think that our students are going to necessarily be memorizing this code of conduct and picking through it, going, oh, well, I can do this on Facebook because it's not stated in here. But I just wanted to see if there was anything that we could actually put in there. But you gave us a good answer. But don't go too far, because this might be for you. On page 89, we talk about cyberbullying. And this is just for clarification. In cyberbullying, we have use of any electronic communication device, et cetera, et cetera. Here we're using electronic. Under the, I think it's somewhere with technology, instead of electronic communication, we use telecommunication device. And it just seems to be an inconsistency of terminology there. Or is it? Or is it one of those legal things that we have to have it stated one way or another?
We can clean that up.
Okay. And I don't know which is legally more, has a wider net for us, but I guess pick whatever's most beneficial. Okay. And the final thing I think is just, I just wanted to clarify that on the agreement that the parents and students sign, the very back page, that essentially that purple text, purple lined information is essentially the exact same as what we just have been spending time on. Is that correct? I just wanted to make sure that it's...
Yes, sir.
All right. Well, thank you for putting up with all of my questions and going through all of this. I'm sure it's been a fun, great, exciting experience for you.
My pleasure, sir.
Look forward to you coming back with some of those minor adjustments. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Hawk?
Thank you. And this may be going a little bit towards Mr. Walker, a little bit. So in this, I didn't see it, and I could have missed it by all means. As we've implemented the Raptor system this year, do we need a separate section on there for visitors and I don't know if that falls into student code of conduct, because the parents are signing this to let them know what we expect from them when they're coming to campus for the visitors of the students. So you see, I'm trying to go with this of students are signing this. Here's the code of conduct we're expecting to adhere to. Do we need a section in there about visitors to visit them on campus? What would be adhered of from them so that students know, and the parents are signing this also. They know that their IDs will be scanned. If they're not scanned, they'll be escorted in the halls at those times. I don't know if this is the right document to put that in or something.
I think it would be.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Early,
I think that's
in
a
the
good place to
front
be.
of the code of conduct, there's several things where we have to put in there, for law.
I know for volunteer, I mean, there's.
Right.
But we could put that in there. It's a good place that everybody, the parent's supposed to sign it.
The parent signs it, and as long as, it's kind of like the students are the folks we're working for, and so, if they're signing this, understand it. If anyone's coming up to be a visitor of theirs, that's the only reason they're coming to campus, to visit, we need to have them understanding what we expect from visitors and what we'll go through and follow through. It seems to make sense.
Yes, we can do that.
Okay, thank you. That's all.
I sense that we're not going to vote on this tonight. In that case, my question is addressed to the board. Do we want to revisit the cell phone policy this year to do something to it, whether it's soften it or strengthen it or somehow allow for the use of phones in the building without the kids going text crazy, and that's really going to be a problem? Do we want to attack that this year?
I personally think so, because right now, the way it stands, our teachers are doing what they can to be innovative, but essentially they're being criminalized, if you will. This is a punitive thing. So if we can work something in there to lessen it this year, and I know this is student code of conduct, but I think it's something that we should look at.
How is it impacting our curriculum?
Well, I think there's a lot of things that, a teacher would like to do, and if in research in a classroom, that a student could be using their own device to do it at the high school level, especially in junior high. And so that gives them more flexibility, and I think as we move forward, though, we're going to see more and more and more where we can need it in our curriculum area. Now, as far as changing this, the board can always come back, and we can come back in August with a recommendation, and we can get it out to the students, prior to school starting, and that's the 24th, I believe, of August. So, we have about 3 months here, not counting July, that we could look at some procedures, and if we can't come up with a procedure we feel comfortable with, we don't have to change it. But if we want to, as Mr. Hogg was saying, we can always change the policy as long as we let the students know and our employees what the policy is.
Mrs. Sullins, you're next.
Thank you, President Barron. I would prefer that I don't want to vote for an outdated policy. We know it's outdated. We may need to make, if we have the opportunity over the summer, as you suggest, to take a look at it, see where to go with it. That would be my preference. So if that's your question.
Mrs. Pena.
The only other area that would be of concern is we're making the assumption that every student has a cell phone that would have internet access that could do all the research. So we in addressing this, we also need to determine if there is a student that doesn't have internet access, that we're asking the students to have, how are we going to accommodate that? because we
Well,
can't penalize those who can't
I
afford
don't
it
think
either.
we're inventing the wheel here. I think
Yeah.
as we look at other districts, we can see how they've handled it, because I know that there are other districts that have a more lenient policy than we do, and so they've had to look at the same issues that we're looking at. So again, it gives us some time to work on it, and we'll have to get input from our principals and teachers too. I mean, don't think we still need to sit up here and change this without some input, because it does affect their classroom and our schools. But I think it's something we need to, now, as far as taking it out of the code of conduct at this time, that would just be, we wouldn't have anything in there at all then. I mean, I think we need to leave it in and then change it in August, revise it. Can we do that legally, Counselor?
Sure. Yeah, we can amend it.
And we could put something out, the change, and I think the word would get out pretty fast if there was a change. So I think it'd be text pretty quick. So, but Ms. Pena makes a good point. We're going to have to study how to handle the situations where maybe not everybody has the same usage coverage.
Dr. Reich.
Yeah, I think just giving it the extra time to bring it back in August is very appropriate. I would think that what comes back in August is not necessarily going to be the end-all, be-all final policy that is in line with our instructional model of our strategic plan and those types of things. So perhaps it would be just a suggestion that it would be discretionary use per classroom, really, per teacher, but with some minor guidelines. Obviously, my thinking in this is that, no, we're not opening this up so that kids are constantly using those things, walking through the passing periods and that type of thing. I think we have to have a little bit of a governor on this, but look forward to it coming back so that we can have some type of student code of conduct amendment. And yes, I think the word will get around very virally, very quickly. Thank you.
Mr. Hibbs.
Of course, I raised my points a little while ago about striking the no's or will nots out. I don't want to speak for the rest of the board. Is that a direction that you think that we should be looking at?
Yes.
Making it where it's, no, I would tell you that emphatically, I would like to see, if we're going to, instead of saying no gauging, we say gauging, and then principals will deal with gauging on a case-by-case basis, because I think that we just need to be
Uniformly enforceable.
Thank you.
And consistently.
Thank you.
Agree with that.
What's wrong with gauging? Okay, nothing was wrong with facial hair. Nothing's wrong with blue hair. Nothing's wrong with mohawks. I mean,
Well, that's
there you have it, all right?
That's right.
I don't know. I can't see getting us wrapped up over gauging.
Well, and that's my whole point.
Yeah.
That is my whole point. If it doesn't need to be there, then it shouldn't be in.
I mean, we get kids in from other states that have big holes in their ears, and we can't say, no, we're not going to take you in our school.
It was placed in there originally because during PE courses, students are required to remove all jewelry. You remove the gauging piece, and the ear descends down, flops around, and can get caught on something, and it becomes a safety issue. That was originally why it was put in there. And when the students start out, the process is it's a little tiny hole, and then it grows and it grows, and it can grow to be a silver dollar size, for those of you who don't know what that is. It's pretty big. And that was the purpose. If they started it, came in from the summer and had started it, well, it's there, unless you pull that thing out. But it's a process, and it can get quite huge. So that was the only reason that was put in there. If we don't require our students to remove all jewelry for PE, if they're no longer having to take PE, whatever reason, then it becomes invalid and no longer needed.
I'd be okay with allowing gauging, because I don't care, and if it's your ear and it comes off, it's your fault. I mean, right, we allow one earring. I think some of the things we do are kind of silly. Now, to go back to the cell phones. I'm on the other side of the fence here, folks. If I picked up every phone I saw, I would get nothing done all day long. I guarantee you that if we let the kids use their phones, and I'm a teacher in a room, and I said, all right, everybody take out your phone because we're going to do some research. 100% of the kids that had phones would check their text messages first, answer all their texts, and then get around to doing whatever I wanted them to do. That's guaranteed. So we need to be careful how far we go with this phones in the room business. And I'd love to hear what's going to come back from the committee on cell phones. Okay. Mr. Hawk.
Thank you, Mr. Barron. As much as I'm up here all the time promoting technology, I'd rather pass an outdated policy than the wrong policy. And as Mr. Barron said, and I agree, providing some flux is fine, but I think a lot of the districts that have started to implement have realized, whoa, what's happening on this? Where are we going with that? How is it enforceable? I also look at the concern of, half this policy is truly in there. This whole code of conduct is for the safety of students and to enhance learning. And so while I do think it can enhance learning, we've got a lot of bugs to work out. So I would rather pass a stricter policy and then put some kind of designation in there of the superintendent has leeway, the principal has leeway for certain class situations, things of that nature, to provide some flexibility in that, just some guidance on that. As far as gauging, if you want to look ridiculous, have your ear gauged. I guess I'm getting old. I just don't understand gauging. But as Mr. Barron said, it's one of those new trends that pops up here and there, and just like grills, why people put those in their mouth, I never really understand. Especially when they have really nice teeth and they still put these cheap $10 grills in their mouth that damages their good teeth. But we've got to have those policies in place and let our principals make those case-by-case situation of what's occurring. And as Ms. Pena said, if it's not the safety factor, so they leave it in. Maybe we determine you can't have a bedazzled gauge or whatever it is in there in the gauging, but you can have some policies that control some of the gauging.
Mrs. Owens.
I'm not sure that the question is whether gauge or not to gauge, or who likes it or who doesn't like it. I think, to me, it's a question of policy. Is our policy appropriately worded so that we have appropriate and consistent enforcement, and we have so therefore it truly is a policy and not a suggestion. So I think gauging is just a suggestion or just an example, but to me, it's all about a policy that's accurate and enforceable, so, on any subject. You want to talk about tattoos? No, just kidding.
What's the guidance we're going to send the committee about gauging?
I think we have a good idea of what the board would like for us to do. We will go back through the code of conduct. We may not pull the whole committee back together. Maybe more of Mr. Walker, Ms. Muldrew, Heather, and myself, and then we go through it and clear up some of the things there.
Okay.
So I think we have a very good idea of what the board is looking for.
Good. Thank you, Ms. Mulgrew.
Thank you,
You got some guidance there, more or less, right?
Yes, sir. Took good notes.
Thank you.
Oh, sir, before I take my seat, will the board allow me permission to introduce
Oh, please do. Yes, absolutely.
Recognize my committee members. My Student Code of Conduct Committee members that are still present, would you please stand? These individuals work very hard for me all.
We always ask, who'd you upset to get put on that committee, huh?
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And that brings us to the open forum for non-agenda items. We have no cards tonight. Mr. McCullough, you ready for the superintendent's report?
I'm trying to find it.
All right, we'll take a sharp pause here and there you go.
I'm ready. So, just some good news. Most of us were at the 7th annual media fair last Thursday night, and this media fair is to encourage students and teachers to fully implement the technology and to use technology to improve teaching and learning. And curriculum-based electronic projects were showcased throughout the PDC, and we had a standing room on the crowd there and had some great just some great work. And Connor Gillespie, is that how you say his name? Gillespie, from Martin High School, was the best of show, and we enjoyed visiting with Connor and also seeing his work. But the neat thing about the media fair, it's pre-K through seniors, and what does the pre-Kers can do with I mean, they're doing things that, you know, just amaze me that we didn't even know about 5 or 6 years ago. So, and congratulations to Seguin High School senior Ellie Frederick for being named the Arlington Youth Service Leader of the Year during the Global Youth Service Day celebration. And I've got 2 appreciation weeks. This week is Food Service Appreciation, and next week is Teacher Appreciation. And I want to thank both these groups of employees for their service to the district and dedication to our students, and we're honored to celebrate. And I hope that everyone will take a time to thank a food service worker tomorrow and to thank a teacher not just next week but every day. So I'll start it. I want to say thank you to. Do we have any teachers in the room tonight? Ah, we got one. I want to thank you for your contributions to our students here in Arlington. So I've started it, and so we'll just thank a teacher. And Mr. Barron, I've started to say, well, we've got 2 teachers here. Thank you, Mr. Barron. So that's my report.
Thank you, Mr. McCullough. Board members' reports. Mrs. Pena.
Today was an exciting day for me. I got to visit Ashworth Elementary along with Dr. Cavazos. They had a wonderful Hispanic Heritage celebration there, and they had some entertainment from Spear Elementary, folklorico dancers. They had the Seguin High School mariachi band there as well, and I had the opportunity to get up on the stage with the principal, some teachers, and Dr. Cavazos, and dance with the students. So it was a delightful time at Ashworth Elementary.
Where's the video?
I don't know. We'll have to ask the principal.
Other board members. Dr. Reich?
Just to comment, let's see, it's all a blur. Last night, night before, I had the pleasure of being at TCC South Campus with President Barron, Ms. Pena, Superintendent McCullough, and all of our high school principals as the Arlington South Rotary recognized 10, I want to say the top 10 students from high school students, seniors from each high school, but the 10 of the best. 10 top, and it's a truly inspiring time to be there, to listen to what these kids do, how they were chosen to be one of the 10. It's always a neat. That's one of my favorite events to attend, and just a proud moment for all of us, and definitely for those parents and those kids. So I just wanted to put a shout out to all those recipients.
Thank you. It is really a blur, isn't it? Last night we had the pleasure of hosting the Arlington City Council in the first ever joint meeting that, I don't know how you forgot that one. between the Arlington City Council and the Arlington School Board, and it was at our Professional Development Center, and it lasted almost an hour, and we found a vast number of areas where we can work together and maybe save all of us some money. I don't think that we'll do this frequently, but we'll certainly do it once or twice a year perhaps, and there will be subcommittees come out of it to do additional planning and come back to the appropriate board. So it really worked out well. I had the pleasure last week of going to a event hosted by Diane Patrick at UTA. It was the 2012 Social Services Leadership Legislative Dialogue. It was all the social services organizations in the city, and there are a lot of them. All had the same tune, that they want more money, they need more money, they provide services, and then they run out of money for all the folks in our area that need help. So feel free to contribute to every or any social service society there that you like, including the United Way, which was a main participant in this. And Mrs. Pena, one more.
Well, I forgot to mention something that Mrs. Sullins and I and Mr. McCullough attended, which was at Martin High School. They had a very important person special ed awards breakfast at 6:45 a.m. And on May 1st. And it was great attendance, despite that it was so early in the morning. And I was surprised Mrs. Sullins went, because she's not a very early morning person. So it was great to see her there. She'll tell you, she's the first to tell you that. She's the first to tell you that. But right about now, she's just kind of glowing and ready to go. Anyway, we had a great time there, and it was wonderful to see the students be acknowledged for their accomplishments and see that they're being prepared for the next level of, some of them were seniors. They're now going to go out into society and get even better at their potential. So I appreciated being invited and hope. I think this was the 3rd annual, or maybe they hadn't been doing this very long, but I hope to continue to be invited.
Last chance, everybody. We're adjourned.